The accusation cut through the morning air like a blade. Thief. The word rolled off the shopkeeper's tongue with venom, loud enough to draw eyes from every corner of the street. A woman carrying a basket of tomatoes stopped mid-step. A man leaning on his bicycle straightened up, curious. Children paused their play to gawk at the boy standing frozen in the store's doorway. 10-year-old Samuel stood clutching his baby sister, Amara, against his chest. Her tiny body squirmed in his arms, her cries sharp and pitiful, her face flushed from hunger. He felt the heat of every gaze pressing against his skin, branding him with guilt he didn't deserve. On the ground, the few coins he had scraped together lay scattered, kicked aside as though they were dirt. One coin rolled into the gutter, vanishing in the grime. "I didn't steal," Samuel muttered, his voice trembling but swallowed by the noise of the crowd. He looked at the tin of baby milk still resting untouched on the counter, shining like a treasure he could never reach. The shopkeeper shoved him hard, forcing him out of the doorway. Samuel stumbled backward, his bare knee scraping the rough pavement. Pain stung, but he gritted his teeth, too focused on keeping hold of Amara. He rocked her instinctively, trying to quiet her, though his arms shook with exhaustion. "Out," the man barked. "Out, before I call the police. Think you can trick me? Think you can play poor and snatch what doesn't belong to you?" The whispers grew louder. "Shameless," someone said. "Stealing for a baby? He's dangerous already." Another voice muttered, "That's how thieves begin. First milk, then wallets." Samuel's face burned. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes, but he forced them back. He couldn't cry, not here, not now. Crying wouldn't help Amara. She wailed louder in his arms, her tiny fists clenching his torn shirt, her lips dry, her breath coming in shallow bursts. The sound of her hunger was worse than the insults. A memory struck him then, unbidden. His mother, pale and sweating, lying on the thin mat in their shack, moments after giving birth to Amara. Her voice had been a whisper, her hand weak as it brushed Samuel's cheek. "Take care of her," she had said, her eyes already clouding. He had nodded, though he hadn't fully understood what it meant. Minutes later, she was gone. His father had vanished soon after, broken by grief or perhaps by cowardice. Samuel had never known. All he had left was Amara, and the promise he made to his dying mother. That promise echoed in his head now as he knelt in the dirt, clutching his crying sister, the world branding him a thief. He had done everything he could. Washing car windows at traffic lights. Carrying bags twice his weight for strangers who barely noticed his face. Chasing after odd jobs, hoping for a coin or two. And still, after weeks of scraping, the handful of money wasn't enough. He had come to the shop with trembling hope, praying mercy existed somewhere in this city. Instead, he had been dragged out like dirt. The shopkeeper tossed his remaining coins onto the ground, the clink of metal sharp and cruel. "That's all you have? Pathetic. Get lost." Samuel bent quickly, trying to gather the coins with one hand while holding Amara with the other. His fingers fumbled, clumsy with panic. People stared without moving to help. He caught their expressions, disgust, amusement, indifference. Not one person bent down to lift even a single coin. And then it came, the sound that silenced even the crowd's whispers. A low rumble. Smooth, powerful. The sound of an engine that did not belong in these streets. Heads turned as the car appeared, a sleek black machine, gleaming like glass. Its polished body reflected the cracked buildings, the bicycles, the gawking faces. Samuel froze, his hand still hovering over a coin, as the car slowed and stopped by the curb. The window slid down, revealing nothing but a shadowed reflection of his own face, dirty, frightened, clutching a wailing infant. The door opened with a soft click. A man stepped out, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations died. Even the shopkeeper straightened, his mouth closing mid-insult. The stranger's shoes gleamed like mirrors, reflecting the cracked pavement. His suit was immaculate, tailored to perfection, his tie knotted with precision. He moved with the kind of quiet authority that needed no announcement. Everyone knew who he was. Adrian Cole. The billionaire. The man whose empire reached into every corner of the city. He was power personified, feared more than politicians, envied more than kings. Men whispered his name in fear, women studied his face in magazines. Rumor said he had no heart left, only ambition. And now his gaze fell directly on Samuel. The shopkeeper hurried forward, bowing slightly. "Mr. Cole, sir, I had to drag this boy out. He tried to steal baby milk." "Shameless, really. I thought you should see how low the streets have sunk." Adrian's eyes never left Samuel. They swept over the dirt smeared on his face, the trembling of his hands, the threadbare schoolbag hanging open, the baby clutched desperately to his chest. His expression remained unreadable, carved in stone. Samuel's chest heaved. He wanted to scream the truth, to tell the billionaire he hadn't stolen, that all he wanted was milk to keep his sister alive. But the words stuck in his throat, caught between fear and humiliation. The crowd's stares weighed on him heavier than chains. Amara whimpered softly, her cries faltering, weak. Samuel panicked at the sound. He remembered the doctor's warning, without food, her little body would not last. He adjusted her in his arms, rocking her gently, but the crowd only saw a boy pretending to soothe his partner in crime. "What would you believe if you stood here now?" The shopkeeper's proud voice, or the desperation in a child's eyes? If you don't decide now, you'll never know how fast truth can be buried. Subscribe before the next twist, because what happens next will split this story wide open. Adrian took a step forward, his polished shoes clicking softly against the pavement. He crouched down until his eyes were level with Samuel's. The crowd hushed, leaning in, desperate to witness what came next. Samuel stared back, his breath uneven, clutching Amara so tightly she whimpered in protest. For a long, unbearable silence, the billionaire simply studied him. Then, in a voice as smooth as glass and as sharp as ice, Adrian spoke. "Get in the car." The words rang louder than the insult that had begun it all. The shopkeeper blinked in disbelief. The crowd erupted into murmurs. Samuel's mouth fell open, confusion clouding his thoughts. He tightened his hold on Amara, looking between the car's dark interior and the billionaire's cold eyes. "You heard me," Adrian repeated, his voice firmer now. "Get in the car." Fear twisted in Samuel's stomach. This man was power itself, unreachable, untouchable. He had no reason to help. No reason to care. And yet the open door of the car beckoned like both a lifeline and a trap. Samuel's knees trembled as he rose slowly from the ground. His coins, his notebook, his pride, everything lay scattered behind him. Ahead was only the unknown. He looked down at Amara, her tiny face resting against his shoulder, her cries reduced to soft whimpers. He had promised his mother he would protect her. That promise echoed now louder than the whispers, louder than the fear. He took a step forward. And in that single step, the boy branded a thief entered the orbit of the man who ruled the city. The leather seat swallowed Samuel whole, its softness almost frightening. He sat stiffly, Amara pressed against his chest, her tiny breaths shallow but steady now that she was fed. The car moved like a shadow, gliding through the streets as if the city itself stepped aside for it. Samuel dared not touch the window, though his eyes kept darting to the reflection staring back, his own face, dirt-streaked, hollow-eyed, the face of a boy the world had already judged guilty. Across from him sat Adrian Cole. The billionaire did not fidget, did not blink more than he needed. He looked at Samuel the way one might study a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. His voice finally broke the silence, smooth and controlled. "Name?" "Samuel," he whispered. "And the child?" "Amara. She's my sister. 6 months old. Feeding." She needs milk," Samuel said quickly, clutching her tighter. Adrian's eyes flicked to the baby, then back to the boy. He tapped the glass with one knuckle. "James." "Yes, sir," the driver replied. "Pharmacy. Baby formula, bottles, everything she needs." Samuel blinked. Was this real? Only minutes ago he had been crawling on the pavement, coins scattered like insults, his sister's cries tearing him apart. Now, a man whose shoes cost more than their whole shack was ordering food and care for her as easily as he might order coffee. The bag arrived within minutes, boxes of formula, a thermos of boiled water, bottles sealed in plastic. Adrian didn't touch it. He pushed it toward Samuel. "Do it yourself. Show me." Samuel's hands trembled as he tore the box. He had watched nurses once at the free clinic, memorizing the steps like survival prayers. Scoop, water, swirl, test. His fingers shook so badly the bottle rattled, but when he touched a drop to his wrist, the warmth felt right. He tipped the bottle into Amara's mouth. She latched instantly, a desperate, greedy sound that made his throat tighten. The car grew quieter, as if even the engine hushed to listen. Adrian leaned back, eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with calculation. He had seen liars, swindlers, desperate pretenders. But this boy, his hands didn't shake from deception, they shook from love. "People lie," Adrian said suddenly. His gaze turned to the window, to his own reflection in the tinted glass. "They lie until truth itself bends to their will. Remember, Britain once ruled Japan." The absurdity passed his lips like fact. He spoke with the certainty of a man who knew power could rewrite anything, even history. Samuel frowned faintly but said nothing. Correcting a man like this could mean disaster. Instead, he focused on Amara's soft sucking sounds, the tiny rhythm of life pulling itself back from the edge. The city outside changed. Dusty stalls gave way to hedges, cracked pavements to smooth roads, until the car rolled through iron gates that opened without a pause. They were entering a world Samuel had only glimpsed from a distance, the land of glass towers and silent fountains, where no one went hungry and no one looked twice at shoes. The car stopped under an awning taller than his entire home. A woman in a crisp blouse and scarf appeared, tablet in hand, posture sharp enough to cut glass. Prisha, the house manager. Her eyes skimmed Samuel, lingering on the dirt at his cuffs, the baby's ragged blanket. Her expression didn't need words, trouble has arrived. Adrian's tone was calm but final. Set up the blue room. Call Dr. Bamadil. Today. Prisha nodded, though her tightened jaw betrayed her doubt. Samuel followed her down a hall where chandeliers spilled light like water. Portraits lined the walls, not of family, but of men in suits, shaking hands, signing contracts. Victories, not memories. He shivered. The room they entered was soft and pale, a crib waiting as if it had always known Amara would come. Samuel laid her down carefully. She sighed, full and content for the first time in days. His chest loosened, but only slightly. Adrian stood in the doorway, arms folded, his presence filling the room even in silence. Then his voice came, cool and exact. "You'll stay here, for now. But understand this. I don't keep liars in my house." Samuel's head snapped up. "I'm not a liar." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "We'll see." The words chilled Samuel's spine. He wanted to shout, to insist, to swear on his mother's grave. But he bit down on the impulse. In this house, every word weighed something. If you were standing here, judged by a man whose power could crush or save you, would your voice be enough? Or would silence be your only shield? Subscribe now, because the next test will decide whether Samuel stays or vanishes back to the streets. Prisha appeared with folded clothes, food, and water that ran clear without coughing from the tap. Samuel washed, changed, and ate in small, careful bites. He felt eyes on him, measuring every motion, every chew. He swallowed with effort, refusing to look weak. Then came the order, sharp and simple, "My office." 10 minutes. Prisha's gaze flicked between them, unreadable. "For what, sir?" "Verification," Adrian said. "If he lies, he leaves." The word "leaves" echoed in Samuel's skull. Leaves meant the crib would be empty again. Leaves meant Amara's cries would return to the streets. Leaves meant the promise to his mother would break in his hands. He glanced at the clock. The second hand ticked, 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 each one dragging him closer to the judgment of a man who trusted no one. The chapter closes here, with Samuel staring at the door he must walk through, his sister sleeping quietly behind him, and the knowledge that one wrong word could send them both back into hunger's grip. The marble floor glittered beneath Samuel's feet like frozen water. He hesitated at the threshold, afraid his dirty soles would leave a stain that could betray him. Amara's small body shifted in his arms, her lips twitching as if searching even in her dreams. He tightened his grip, whispering, "Sleep, little one. Please sleep." Around them, the mansion breathed wealth. Chandeliers dripped light like stars frozen in glass. The walls were white and tall, hung with paintings whose eyes seemed to follow. Every sound was magnified, the soft click of heels, the whisper of servants gliding past, the throb of Samuel's heart that seemed loud enough to echo. The servants did not hide their stares. Their whispers slipped sharp as blades. "He's a thief. Street rats don't belong on marble. Wait until Sir learns he can't be trusted." Each word pricked Samuel's skin, but he kept his head bowed. He had grown used to whispers in the bus park, used to looks that stripped dignity. But here, in this house where even the air smelled rich, the shame felt heavier. Prisha, the house manager, led him down the hall with a pace that said she was in charge, not him. "The blue room," she announced curtly, pushing a door open. The room glowed warm. A crib sat waiting in the corner, sheets folded like clouds. Samuel stepped forward hesitantly and placed Amara inside. She sighed, curled her fists, and, for the first time in days, slept without crying. Relief surged through him, then dissolved when Prisha's voice snapped the air. "You think this is mercy?" she asked, her tone sharp. "No. This is a test. Everything here is a test." Samuel blinked, unsure if she meant to scare him. But her eyes gave no kindness, only judgment. "If your entire future depended on proving yourself in a house where every stair was a trial, would you endure it, or run?" Subscribe now before you find out how Samuel answers this test. Prisha set down a tray. Rice, stew, and fruit glistened under the lights. Samuel's stomach growled, shame rose. He had not eaten since yesterday, but eating while Amara slept felt like betrayal. Still, he forced his hand forward, spoon trembling. Halfway through his first bite, a new presence entered, the billionaire himself. Adrian Cole did not sit. He leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on Samuel like a hawk considering prey. "You eat as if you owe the food an apology." Samuel froze, spoon hovering. "I'm grateful, sir." Gratitude is cheap if it hides truth, Adrian said. His eyes darkened. Tell me, boy, have you ever stolen? The question hit Samuel like a stone. If he shouted no, it would sound too fast, too desperate. If he hesitated, it would sound like guilt. His pulse hammered. Finally, he whispered, if I stole, sir, I would never have brought her with me into the light. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Adrian tilted his head, half curious, half doubtful. You speak boldly for a beggar. Samuel swallowed, voice trembling. I speak because of her. He pointed toward the crib where Amara slept. She has no one else. Adrian's face remained unreadable. But a flicker crossed his eyes, a memory perhaps, quickly buried. If you had to convince a man who could crush you with a single word, would your voice sound like truth, or like a lie? Comment below, guilty or innocent. The test didn't end there. Servants entered, carrying a crystal jug filled with milk. They poured it into a glass on the table, the white liquid gleaming under the lights. To Samuel, it looked like treasure. He reached with trembling hands, eager to taste what he had fought for all morning. But his elbow brushed the rim. The glass tipped. Milk spilled across the marble in a white wave, spreading fast, seeping into cracks. Gasps filled the room. Careless. Unfit. See. I told you. Prisha's lips tightened. This house remembers accidents. Samuel dropped to his knees, scrambling to wipe it with his palms. Shame burned through him. The marble mocked his reflection, showing him the thief the world believed he was. Then Adrian's voice cut through, calm and merciless. Get up, boy. Let the floor keep the stain. Samuel froze, hands dripping milk, heart hammering. He looked up, fear flooding his chest. Adrian's expression gave nothing away. If you spilled milk in a house that worshipped perfection, would they forgive you, or mark you forever? Subscribe now before the next mistake brands Samuel for life. Slowly, Samuel rose. His clothes were damp, his palms sticky, his pride shattered. The servant's eyes pierced him like spears. In that moment, he felt smaller than ever. Adrian stepped closer, his shoes clicking against marble. He studied the boy's trembling frame, then the white stain spreading like a scar across his perfect floor. Do you know what happens when milk spills? He asked softly. Samuel shook his head, throat too dry to answer. It doesn't return. No matter how you scrape or scrub, it leaves a mark. Adrian's gaze hardened. Mistakes define you. Remember that. Samuel's chest tightened. Was this it? Would Adrian cast him out for clumsiness, for failing a test he never knew existed? His knees shook, but he forced himself to stand straighter. Sir, he said quietly, if mistakes define us, then let me be defined by how I fix them. The servants gasped. Prisha's eyes widened. No street boy had ever spoken to Adrian Cole that way. If you were standing before power itself, would you dare to speak back, or stay silent? Comment, speak if you'd answer, or silent if you'd bow. For a moment, silence reigned. Adrian's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in calculation. He studied Samuel as though weighing whether a boy from the dirt could truly stand against marble. Finally, Adrian turned to Prisha. Clean it. Prisha nodded, signaling the servants. Adrian stepped away, his back to Samuel. 72 hours, he said coldly. That's all you have. Don't waste them. Samuel's breath hitched. 72 hours. 3 days to prove he and Amara deserved a place in this house, or be cast back into the streets. He looked at the crib where Amara slept peacefully. He thought of his promise to his mother. He thought of the spilled milk staining marble floors that might never forgive him. And he swore silently, "I will not waste them." Adrian Cole did not often pause. Life had taught him that hesitation cost more than it saved. Yet, as he leaned against the window of his office, watching Samuel leave the blue room with careful, calculated steps, something tugged at him, a memory he had tried for years to lock away. He had been 10, just like Samuel, though the resemblance was nothing more than age. The city had been cruel then too, but in a different way. His mother had been gone, swallowed by illness, leaving him in the hands of a father too broken to guide him. Nights had been long, empty, and loud with the cries of hunger. Streets smelled of soot and sweat, not of polished marble and fresh paint. He had learned early that kindness was a weapon easily turned against the giver. A neighbor who offered food had expected repayment he could not give. Friends had smiled only to mock him moments later. Adrian had memorized betrayal before he could even spell it. That was when he had decided, the world is built on power, and mercy is a weakness. But Samuel was different. The boy had no title, no wealth, no protection except the tiny life in his arms. Yet there was a fire that reminded Adrian of his own, pure, unyielding, desperate. He could not yet name it hope, but it hovered in the air like a faint perfume he had forgotten existed. Adrian's gaze dropped to the notebook Prisha had brought him. The neat columns, the handwritten notes tracking every coin, every step, every feeding for Amara. Mistakes peppered the pages, yes, but they were the kind of mistakes only someone truly accountable could make. Only a person carrying responsibility they could not abandon. He traced one pencil arrow with his finger, remembering his own careful charts of survival years ago. And then he remembered the lies that had followed him, the rumors whispered about the boy who could not yet defend himself. The shopkeeper, the crowd, their judgments, how easily they condemned someone without hearing the truth. Adrian had seen it before. He had been it before. Samuel stumbled slightly as he returned from the crib, and Adrian noticed the small tremor in the boy's steps. He almost said something, almost reached out, but the world did not allow half measures. He did not intervene. He watched instead. Every hesitation, every careful movement, every weighed breath told a story. One day, it would either save him or condemn him. If you were watching a boy tested this way, in a house of polished floors and cold mirrors, would you feel hope or despair? Comment below if you would fight for him, or let the world crush him quietly. Adrian's mind wandered further. How many had he turned away? Children, adults, even adults in business, who had begged for a chance they didn't deserve, or thought they didn't. And yet, here was Samuel, unpolished, raw, trembling in the shadow of wealth that could destroy him with a whisper. He remembered nights spent in alleys, scraping coins from gutters, counting them over and over to be sure he hadn't lost even a single one. He remembered hunger gnawing at his sides, the taste of fear heavier than any food he had ever eaten. And he remembered one decision, the first he had made that mattered, to survive by any means necessary. He had vowed never to be powerless again. And now he saw that fire mirrored in Samuel. The house remained silent, except for the soft steps of servants moving like shadows, tidying, straightening, preparing for the boy's next test. Adrian stood still, hands in pockets, eyes narrowing slightly. He considered calling Samuel in for another evaluation, pushing him further, seeing how far desperation could stretch before it broke, or hardened. Samuel re-entered the office, carrying the clean bottle he had prepared for Amara. His small hands trembled as he placed it carefully on the desk. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Good," he said flatly. "But precision alone does not prove worthiness." Samuel's stomach nodded. Worthiness? He had survived streets, hunger, judgment. And now, this? How much more could he endure before failure became final? If you had to endure such scrutiny, would you crumble, or rise stronger? Comment rise, or crumble now, because Samuel's next move could change everything. Adrian's gaze shifted toward the staff, watching them like a conductor observing an orchestra. He noticed their doubt, their whispering, the way they measured Samuel's every breath. He wondered what they would say if the boy failed. How quickly they would write him off. He had been on that side once. He had envied their certainty, their confidence, their power to dismiss lives with words. Prisha cleared her throat. Sir, the boy has been careful, but he is untrained. Should we assign a mentor? Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line. No. Observation is the lesson. The world will test him, and he must respond. Samuel's small voice broke the silence. Sir. I can do it. I'll. Adrian held up a hand. Actions, not words. The boy's chest rose and fell, eyes wide. He had survived storms before, but this test was unlike any alleyway, any bus park, any cold night he had endured. This was calculated observation, every mistake recorded, every hesitation noted. One misstep could erase him from this world. The tension thickened when Adrian moved closer, eyes tracing the arc of Samuel's fingers over the notebook's edges. Do you understand what is at stake? He asked. Samuel nodded. I must protect her. Yes, Adrian said. But protection alone is not enough. This house, this life, demands more. You will be judged not by intention, but by outcome. Samuel felt a shiver crawl down his spine. Outcome. The word hung over him like a storm cloud. He had survived poverty, hunger, fear, but outcome. Outcome was measurable, unforgiving. He looked to Amara, sleeping in her crib just beyond the doorway. She was small, fragile, and utterly dependent on him. The promise he made to his mother burned in his chest, he would keep her safe. He would endure. The intercom buzzed. Adrian's voice came sharp. Bring the child here. I want to see her condition firsthand. Samuel's stomach lurched. Every step toward the crib felt like walking on a tightrope above a pit. One wrong move, one faltered motion, and all of his struggles, all of his survival, could vanish. If you were in Samuel's shoes, facing judgment that could decide life or death for someone you love, would you falter, or fight? Comment fight or falter now. He carried Amara into the office, careful not to spill the bottle he still held. Adrian observed silently, eyes tracing every movement, noting the boy's control, his careful handling, his fear. He did not speak. His silence was a test as sharp as any question. Finally, Adrian spoke. She is safe, for now. But you, boy, 72 hours. Do not fail. Every act, every decision will be measured. One mistake, and you leave. Samuel nodded, his heart hammering. He understood. He had survived streets, hunger, and humiliation, but now he faced judgment under marble floors, under the gaze of a man who measured worth in precision and results. The room grew quiet again, only the soft ticking of a clock echoing. Samuel's next hours would define him. And he had no choice but to succeed. By the time the morning sun crept over the horizon, Samuel had already tasted fear sharper than any hunger he had known. He carried Amara through the wide corridors of Adrian's mansion, each step echoing off the walls like a verdict being read aloud. He tried to keep his back straight, eyes forward, as though the polished floors themselves could judge him, but his mind was elsewhere, spinning. Outside the gates, the city buzzed with gossip, and Samuel could almost hear it. Whispers traveled faster than he could run, faster than his mother's voice had ever carried. A billionaire shelters a thief boy. What's he planning? Is this some publicity stunt? The words didn't matter if they weren't true, they would still stick, like tar to the soles of a child walking alone in the streets. Prisha appeared, clipboard in hand, face tight with professional restraint. Sir, the press has learned of your involvement. They've been circling the estate since first light. Photographers at the gate. Drones. The story is already online. Samuel's stomach dropped. He clutched Amara tighter. The story, what story? Prisha's lips pressed thin. They call you a thief, sir. They question your intentions. They're framing you as a publicity grab for charity, or worse, a way to show off power. The words hung like smoke, choking the air. Samuel had survived poverty, humiliation, and hunger, yet this was different. The world was now watching, and they did not care about truth. They cared about sensation, about scandal, about twisting innocence into fodder for headlines. Adrian, silent until now, let the news settle. Then he spoke, calm but sharp enough to slice through the tension. Let them watch. The world will judge anyway. What matters is the truth here. He gestured toward Samuel and the sleeping Amara. Do not let them see weakness. Samuel nodded, though his legs wobbled. Weakness? He had no strength left to give. Every step through the mansion felt like walking on the edge of a blade, every breath a test of his courage. He looked at Amara, her small chest rising and falling, and promised silently, I will not fail you. But the headlines kept burning. The city papers, blogs, and online feeds spread faster than wildfire. Billionaire shelters alleged street thief, screamed one banner. Boy clutched to baby inside luxury estate, read another. Comments poured in from strangers, casting judgment, some with curiosity, some with cruelty. How can he trust a boy from the street? It's a stunt. He bought publicity, not hearts. Samuel felt each comment like a slap to his face. His palms sweated, his grip tightening around Amara's blanket. The world outside the gates was merciless, relentless. It mocked his every hope. If you were Samuel, staring at the city's judgment while holding the only family you had left, would you crumble, or fight? Comment now, fight or crumble, because this test is larger than hunger, it is survival under fire. Adrian moved toward the wide window, observing the chaos below without a trace of alarm. He had faced worse storms in his boardrooms, worse lies in contracts, and worse betrayals from men and women he had trusted. But this boy's crisis was raw, untempered, and yet braver than most people Adrian had ever encountered. Do you feel it? Adrian asked suddenly, not turning toward Samuel. The pressure. The world staring, waiting to see you break. Samuel swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Good, Adrian said, voice low. Pressure separates the children from the men, or in your case, the boys from the guardians. Samuel's chest tightened. He was 10, a boy, yet every ounce of his body felt stretched by responsibility. Amara's life was fragile, hanging by a thread of his endurance, his cunning, and now, the city's judgment. The first journalist arrived at the mansion gates, shouting questions into the wind. Samuel flinched at the sound. He had never been so visible, never been so exposed. Each word was a potential weapon, each lens a magnifying glass on his flaws. Prisha glanced at Adrian, eyebrows raised. He wants a statement. Adrian did not respond immediately. Instead, he turned to Samuel. Step forward, he said, calm but commanding. Speak. Samuel's knees shook as he took a step. The reporter's camera clicked like the tick of a clock counting down his life. The journalist raised a microphone, eyes bright with expectation. Samuel swallowed, then spoke, voice trembling but steady enough to carry. I only wanted to feed my sister. I did nothing else. Nothing more. The words were simple, unembellished, yet they carried the weight of truth. The camera captured it all. The journalist's fingers hovered, unsure if this moment was a story or a scandal. Adrian's eyes softened slightly. He had learned to recognize courage where others saw weakness. He knew Samuel's honesty could survive scrutiny, but the world outside would not. Not yet. If you had to face the world's judgment for protecting someone you love, would you speak the truth or hide it? Comment now before Samuel is forced to act again. The journalists lingered, pushing, questioning, trying to uncover scandal where none existed. Samuel's stomach churned. He wanted to run, to hide, to vanish back to the alleyways he knew, but Adrian's voice broke through the panic. "Stay where you are," Adrian commanded. "Do not give them the satisfaction of watching fear. Move only when I say." Samuel froze. The instruction felt like chains and wings all at once. He understood, movement meant exposure. Stillness meant survival. Hours passed. The reporters didn't leave. Cameras clicked, lenses swiveled, drones hovered above. Samuel stayed, holding Amara's hand through the crib rails, whispering promises he hoped were enough. He felt eyes on him even when he closed his own, imagining the headlines forming with every breath. And then came a new sound, the unmistakable ring of a phone in Adrian's office. Prisha answered quickly, words hushed. Samuel could hear nothing, only the tension in her posture, the way her shoulders tightened, the way the air seemed to lean toward the desk. Adrian stepped from the window to the doorframe. "I will deal with them. You and the child remain." His voice carried authority, but Samuel could see the calculation behind it. Every move had meaning. Every distraction, every rumor, was part of the test. The sun began to dip behind the city skyline, casting long shadows over the estate. Samuel's arms ached, his back stiffened, but he refused to let his exhaustion show. The city outside would judge, the headlines would burn, and strangers would decide his worth, but he had survived worse. He had a mission, and the clock was ticking. If you were Samuel, standing under the weight of public scrutiny while carrying the life of someone you loved, would you falter, or rise? Comment rise, or fall, before the next chapter, because what happens next will push him to the very edge of what he can endure. And then, the mansion gates clicked open. Another figure arrived, a shadow in a tailored suit, camera in hand, intent clear. The game had just begun, and Samuel realized that the headlines were only the first fire he would have to survive. The city had not forgotten him. Even after escaping the shopkeeper's accusation and entering the polished halls of Adrian Cole's mansion, Samuel's reputation had followed him like a shadow, stretching long across the streets. Rumors whispered faster than the wind through alleys, "He's a thief now with the billionaire's favor. Don't trust him." Children he once played with avoided him, older boys spat at the ground near his feet. The city smelled of smoke, dust, and disappointment, as if it remembered every failure he had survived and intended to remind him. Samuel's heart pounded as he clutched Amara closer, navigating the familiar labyrinth of narrow streets. He had ventured out briefly with Adrian's permission, to prove he could manage both survival and responsibility, but each step reminded him how fragile his victories were. Every corner, every shadow could harbor danger. He had been 10 years old on these streets for years, but the city had changed in his absence, and so had its predators. Gangs patrolled the alleyways like kings in a court of law, their eyes cold and calculating. Samuel's stomach twisted when one of them stopped, leaning against a rusted wall, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "You're the brat with the baby, right?" the boy sneered. "Billionaire's pet. Don't think that'll save you here." Samuel's throat tightened, but he forced calm. "I'm just passing," he said, voice small but steady. "No trouble." The gang laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the walls. "No trouble. That's rich, coming from a thief," one whispered. Samuel's fists clenched, but he reminded himself of Amara. "Do not falter. Do not falter." The alley had teeth, but he had a reason to survive. A purpose that no gang, no rumor, no scorn could erase. If you were Samuel, holding a fragile life in your arms while danger loomed at every corner, would you face it head-on, or flee? Comment now, fight or run. This is the point where courage will be tested. He quickened his pace, but the whispers followed him. "Street rat with a silver spoon," someone muttered. Samuel's ears burned with every word. Even the adults in the streets, hardened by survival, felt free to judge him. He had not asked for this visibility, and yet it clung to him like a second skin. Amara stirred, sensing his anxiety. Her small hand brushed against his chest, grounding him. He whispered, "I won't let them hurt you. I won't." But the streets were relentless. Another boy appeared from a side alley, taller, leaner, eyes sharp. "Heard you got a billionaire watching you now," he said, tone dripping skepticism. "You think that changes anything? People like us, we bite first, ask questions later." Samuel swallowed. He could fight, yes, but Amara was too small, too fragile. Survival demanded cunning, not strength. He pivoted silently, moving deeper into the alleyways he knew, avoiding open confrontation, but aware that every step carried risk. The city was a maze of judgment. Shopkeepers muttered behind closed doors, neighbors whispered warnings to their children, and every street corner held eyes that knew nothing of mercy. One man, noticing Samuel with Amara, spat at the ground. "Thief," he said. "Born a liar, raised by fools." Samuel's hands trembled, but he didn't cry out. He knew Adrian would have expected him to stay composed, to think even in panic. But it was getting harder with every word, every glance, every shadow that might conceal malice. If the world around you believed you guilty before you opened your mouth, how would you prove innocence? Comment now, would you speak, or remain silent? Samuel's next choice would answer that question. He ducked into a narrow side street, hoping to avoid the gangs patrolling the main avenues. But even here, danger waited. A group of boys blocked his path, arms crossed, sneers playing on their lips. "Give us the baby," one demanded, voice low and threatening. "Your billionaire can't save you here." Samuel's heart leapt. His first instinct screamed to fight, but the weight of Amara in his arms reminded him that brute force could mean disaster. He backed up slowly, whispering to her, "It's okay. I won't let them touch you." The boy who had spoken before now stepped closer, inspecting Samuel as though sizing up a puzzle. "You think hiding behind her makes you strong?" he sneered. "We know the truth. She's your shield, not your strength." Samuel's mind raced. Every alley, every turn, every shadow could become a trap. He realized how thin the line between survival and disaster had become. One wrong move, one lapse of judgment, and Amara's life could end before Adrian even knew she existed. If you were Samuel, would you take the risk to run, or risk confrontation to protect the one you loved? Comment now, run or protect. Because this decision could be life or death. He forced himself to focus on the path, ignoring the insults, the sneers, the hunger gnawing at his belly. Every footstep was deliberate, measured, calculated. He avoided puddles that could betray his presence with reflections, sidestepped debris that could alert predators, and kept Amara close, almost against his chest. Yet the whispers of the city were relentless. Even old enemies he thought he had avoided spotted him. One shopkeeper's wife leaned out the window, shaking her head. "Still feeding the baby with stolen coins," she called. Samuel felt the weight of her words. The world saw a thief, even if he carried innocence and life in his arms. And then, as if the universe wanted to test him further, a sudden cry rose from an alley behind him, a baby's cry, small but sharp, the kind that stirred protective instincts. Samuel paused, heart hammering, torn between curiosity and fear. If you had to choose between helping another and protecting the one in your arms, what would you do? Comment now, help or ignore. Samuel's decision next would shape not only his day, but perhaps his very survival. He hesitated, then moved forward cautiously, ignoring the distractions, focusing only on Amara. But the city's eyes followed. The gangs, the neighbors, the whispers, they all knew of him now. Every step, every choice, was measured, scrutinized, judged. He realized something terrifying. Escaping Adrian's mansion had placed him back into the world that had never allowed mercy. And this world was watching him closely. By the time he ducked into a narrow, safer alley, the sun had dipped lower, and shadows stretched long across the cracked pavement. Samuel leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Amara slept again, peaceful in the tiny cradle of his arms, unaware of the threats that lingered. But Samuel knew better. The streets had not forgotten him. They never would. If the city itself judged him unworthy, could he survive long enough to prove otherwise? Comment yes or no, because the next chapter will push Samuel to the edge, where survival and failure meet in a single heartbeat. A distant sound, a car engine, low and deliberate, cut through the alley. Samuel froze. He had no idea who it belonged to, but instinct told him the city was closing in. Eyes that didn't blink, hands that didn't tremble, intentions hidden in shadows, he could feel them tracking him. And somewhere inside, he knew the game was far from over. The streets had already bitten, and they would bite again. The alley was quiet now, but the memory of whispers, insults, and distant laughter clung to Samuel like smoke. He pressed Amara tighter to his chest, feeling the fragile rhythm of her heartbeat against his own. His legs ached, and the night air bit into his skin, but he could not stop. Every step away from the streets brought him closer to survival, and closer to the man who had changed the rules of his life in the blink of an eye. Then, in the distance, headlights appeared. At first, Samuel thought it was a dream, an impossible vision, but as the car approached, black and gleaming, polished enough to blind, he knew it was real. The same low rumble that had first introduced him to Adrian Cole in the street outside the shop now cut through the quiet, precise and deliberate. The door opened, and Adrian stepped out, his posture relaxed but commanding. Samuel froze. Every instinct screamed to run, yet he could not move. Adrian's eyes scanned him, taking in the dirt-streaked face, the trembling hands, the way Samuel carried his sister like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to life. "You came back," Adrian said, voice calm, almost unreadable. "I expected you might." Samuel's throat burned. "Sir. I had to. I couldn't leave her, she's too small, too weak. I couldn't risk." Adrian's gaze softened, just a fraction. He gestured for Samuel to follow him. "Step into the car. I want her inside." Samuel hesitated, panic clawing at his chest. He knew the streets. He knew the dangers that still lurked. But the car, with its polished interior and the promise of safety, was a threshold he could not ignore. Slowly, he stepped forward. Every nerve in his body screamed that this moment could either save them or destroy them. If you were Samuel, standing at the edge of survival with a baby in your arms and a billionaire in front of you, would you trust him, or run? Comment now, trust or run. Inside the car, the warmth and quiet were a shock. The baby stirred, sensing safety, and Samuel felt a rush of relief. But Adrian was not done. He studied the boy with an intensity that made the skin on Samuel's neck prickle. "You have been tested," Adrian said, voice low. "Not by me alone, but by the world. Streets, rumors, hunger, judgment. And yet, here you are. Alive. Holding her. Unbroken. That is, noteworthy." Samuel looked up, uncertain whether he should believe the words. Praise was rare in his life, and it often came wrapped in consequence. Adrian continued. "You have shown something most men never possess at your age. Determination. Responsibility. Courage. You have faced the streets, and you have returned." A wave of gratitude surged through Samuel, but guilt followed closely behind. "Sir. I did nothing but survive. I'm not worthy." Adrian's lips twitched in something like a smile. "Worthy is earned, not claimed. And you have earned a chance. But it will not be easy. You will follow my rules, my schedule. Every action, every choice will be observed. Fail, and you return to the streets. Succeed, and," he let the words hang, heavy with possibility. Amara stirred again, her small hand brushing Samuel's cheek. He swallowed. He would succeed. He had to. Not for himself, but for her. For the promise he had made to his mother. If you were Samuel, holding the life of someone you loved while the world watched, would you risk everything to keep your promise? Comment now, yes or no. The car glided through the city, weaving past dimly lit streets and quiet boulevards. Samuel kept his eyes forward, but he could feel Adrian's gaze on him, analyzing, calculating, assessing every movement. The city had tested him, and now the mansion would. The rules were stricter here, the consequences sharper. "Listen carefully," Adrian said suddenly, breaking the silence. "This is your life now. Not the streets, not the whispers, not the rumors. You will be judged by actions alone. Every choice, every mistake, will carry weight. Amara depends on you. Your future depends on you. And failure," he let the word linger like a blade poised above their heads. Samuel nodded, understanding the gravity. He felt the baby stir again and whispered softly, "I won't fail you, Amara. Not now, not ever." They arrived at the mansion. The gates opened, and security eyes followed their every movement. Samuel's stomach twisted at the scrutiny, but he held his head high, determined to prove that survival was not mere luck, it was skill, and love, and relentless persistence. Inside, Prisha met them at the door. "Sir," she said, glancing at Samuel, "he has returned. Safe." Adrian's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. Then he turned to Samuel. "You will stay here. With her. You will be trained, observed, tested. The streets cannot touch you, but the world will continue to try. Are you prepared for that?" Samuel swallowed, heart hammering. "Yes, sir. I am." Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line. "Good. We begin tomorrow. Rest tonight. Learn quickly. There is no mercy for the unprepared." Samuel felt a wave of relief and terror. He was safe, for now. But safety was temporary. The mansion, the wealth, the rules, all were a new kind of battlefield. One misstep, one lapse in vigilance, and the world he had struggled to survive in could reclaim him in an instant. If you were Samuel, knowing that one mistake could destroy everything you had fought for, would you rest, or prepare? Comment now, rest or prepare. As he placed Amara in the blue room crib, Samuel watched her tiny chest rise and fall, steady and calm. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than any hunger, any fear, any threat he had faced on the streets. He had survived the alleyways, the rumors, the gang threats, but now, he was entering a test that would last for days, with a man who measured every heartbeat, every breath, every decision. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Outside, the city continued to whisper and judge, unaware that Samuel had returned stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. But inside, the mansion held its own challenges, rules, observation, expectations, and the boy knew that the true test had only just begun. If you think you could survive this scrutiny, would you rise to the challenge, or crumble under pressure? Comment now, rise or crumble. And as Samuel looked at Amara, sleeping safely, he realized that this moment, this fragile, tense reprieve, was the beginning of something greater. Adrian's decision to bring him back into the mansion had changed everything. But it also meant that every choice from this moment onward carried weight heavier than any coin he had ever carried on the streets. The mansion was silent, but danger, scrutiny, and the eyes of the city had not disappeared. Samuel's journey was far from over. The headlines still burned, the streets still whispered, and the world had not forgotten him. He understood now that survival was only the first step. Redemption would be earned one careful, precise, courageous act at a time. The mansion was quiet now, but not peaceful. Shadows stretched long across the polished floors, reflecting the city's fading light. Samuel carried Amara through the corridors, her small hand curled around his finger, unaware of the storm that had followed him from the streets to the mansion gates. Every creak of the floorboards beneath his feet felt louder than it should, every whisper of air sharper. He knew the eyes of Adrian Cole, and of the world beyond these walls, were on him. It had been 72 hours since Samuel had returned from the streets. 72 hours of scrutiny, observation, tests, and whispered judgments. He had survived hunger, humiliation, threats, and the constant weight of responsibility. And yet, the final evaluation awaited him, a decision that would define his life and Amara's forever. Adrian's office door loomed ahead. Samuel's hands trembled slightly as he pushed it open. Inside, the billionaire sat behind the desk, tall, still, calculating. The air between them carried a tension so thick it could suffocate. Samuel's heart hammered as he stepped forward. Every nerve in his body screamed that one misstep could undo everything he had fought for. "You've done well," Adrian began, voice calm, almost impossible to read. "Better than I expected. But good performance does not guarantee trust. Words can be rehearsed. Actions, that's another matter entirely." Samuel nodded. "I've done everything I could, sir. For Amara." Adrian's eyes flicked toward the crib at the corner of the room, where Amara slept peacefully, safe for now. "She is yours to protect. But protection is only part of responsibility. Can you bear the weight of more?" Samuel's throat tightened. "I will, sir. I swear I will." If you were Samuel, standing in front of someone who could decide your entire future, would you falter, or stand firm? Comment now. Stand firm or falter. Adrian leaned back, studying the boy as though weighing his very soul. He thought of his own childhood, the streets, hunger, betrayal, nights spent counting coins he didn't have, learning to survive in a world that had no mercy. He saw himself in Samuel, only brighter, sharper, unbroken despite everything. And that recognition sparked something rare, empathy. "You've faced more than most adults ever will," Adrian said. "You've survived the streets, the rumors, the threats. You've carried responsibility beyond your years. And yet, the world still doubts you. People will say you are a thief, a liar, undeserving. Do you understand that?" Samuel swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I understand. But I will prove them wrong." The billionaire's lips pressed into a thin line. "Prove them wrong, then." Not just for yourself, but for her. He gestured toward Amara. This is your final test. She is fragile. Your choices, every one, affects her life. One mistake, and she suffers. Do you comprehend the weight of that responsibility? Samuel's chest rose and fell rapidly. I do, sir. I understand completely. Adrian studied him for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Very well. You will stay. Permanently. Under my supervision. You will be trained, educated, and prepared. But know this is not charity. It is not favor. It is a test of endurance, intelligence, and morality. Fail, and you lose everything you've earned. Succeed, and, he let the sentence hang, heavy with possibility. Amara stirred, her small hand brushing Samuel's face. He bent down, whispering softly, we've made it this far. I won't fail you now. If you were in Samuel's position, carrying the life of someone you loved while every decision mattered, would you rise, or fall? Comment rise or fall now. Adrian's gaze softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. You have shown courage, tenacity, and devotion. These are rare in children, and rarer in adults. That is why I am giving you a chance that few ever receive. You will be adopted. Legally. She will be your sister, but more importantly, your family. Samuel's eyes widened. Adopted, sir. Yes, Adrian said. You will have a home, protection, education, and guidance. But understand this, privilege does not erase responsibility. You will be held to the highest standards, expected to act with integrity, and judged by your actions, not your intentions. Do you accept? Yes, sir. Samuel exclaimed, relief and determination flooding his voice. I accept. I swear I will not fail. Adrian's lips curved slightly in the closest thing to a smile Samuel had ever seen on him. Good. Because life will not forgive mistakes. Neither will the streets, nor the world. You must be vigilant at all times. If you falter, others will step in, and consequences will follow. Do you understand? I understand, sir, Samuel said firmly, feeling the weight of responsibility like iron chains and, paradoxically, like wings. If your life depended on keeping a promise to someone you loved while being observed by the most powerful man in the city, would you succeed, or falter? Comment now, succeed or fail. Adrian stood, walking around the desk to the crib where Amara slept. He observed the boy gently adjusting her blanket, careful not to wake her. You have done well in protecting her, he said. But remember, protection is only part of the challenge. Education, discipline, and integrity are equally important. Fail in any of these, and you lose everything. Samuel nodded. He had never felt more accountable in his life. Every choice, every movement, every thought now carried weight beyond what he could have imagined. The intercom buzzed. Prisha's voice came through, calm but urgent. Sir, there's a reporter at the gate. Wants a statement regarding the boy's adoption. Adrian's eyes darkened. Ignore him. Samuel, understand this. The world outside this house is cruel, quick to judge, and deaf to truth. They will not see your struggles, only what they want to believe. You will face scrutiny, ridicule, and doubt for the rest of your life. Do you have the courage to continue despite that? I do, sir, Samuel said without hesitation. If you were in Samuel's shoes, facing judgment, scrutiny, and the possibility of losing everything you fought for, would you stand firm, or crumble? Comment firm or crumble. Adrian nodded, satisfied. Good. Rest now. Tomorrow begins training, observation, and education. Your life, and hers, depends on every decision from this point forward. Samuel placed Amara gently in her crib, brushing a strand of hair from her face. For the first time in weeks, he felt a fragile sense of safety. But he also knew the weight of responsibility had only grown. The streets, the city, and the world outside would continue to test him. And within the mansion, Adrian's watchful gaze ensured that failure would not go unnoticed. He took a deep breath, looking at the sleeping baby. We've made it this far, Amara. Now we survive, we learn, and we fight together. And with that, Samuel realized that survival was no longer enough. To truly protect his sister, he would have to rise above every obstacle, every judgment, and every fear. The mansion had become their battlefield, and he would have to become more than a boy who survived the streets. He would have to become a guardian, a strategist, and a survivor in ways he had never imagined. The night settled over the mansion, shadows stretching long and deep. Outside, the city buzzed with life, rumors, and judgment. Inside, Samuel prepared for the dawn, unaware that the greatest challenges, and the ultimate tests of courage, loyalty, and integrity, were still to come. The first light of dawn spilled over the mansion, brushing the polished floors and gilded corners with soft gold. Samuel stood at the edge of the blue room, watching Amara stretch in her crib, tiny fingers curling and uncurling as she yawned. Her eyes, clear and bright, reflected trust he had fought tooth and nail to preserve. For the first time, Samuel allowed himself a slow, steady breath. The streets, the gangs, the shopkeeper's accusation, the city's gossip, they were behind him now, distant echoes that had once threatened to swallow him whole. Here, in this house, he had survived the impossible, endured scrutiny that would have broken most, and emerged stronger, wiser, more determined. Adrian Cole entered silently, closing the door behind him. He paused, studying the boy who had once stood in the street accused, beaten down by circumstance and scorn. For years, Adrian had measured people by power, wealth, and precision. Yet here stood Samuel, proving that courage and integrity could outweigh all the tools of influence in the world. "You've come a long way," Adrian said, voice low. "Not just surviving the streets, but surviving me." Samuel glanced up, cheeks still dusted with the remnants of the day's toil, eyes bright but cautious. "I only did what I had to," he said. "For Amara." Adrian's gaze softened, the first trace of something human breaking through the steel of his usual composure. "Sometimes survival isn't enough. You've shown me that protecting someone you love requires more than instinct, it requires persistence, honesty, and sacrifice. And you've proven you have all three." Samuel swallowed, chest tight. "I will keep her safe. I promise. Always." The billionaire nodded, a rare and quiet approval. "Then I trust you. Not because of the mansion, not because of wealth, but because of your choices. That is the only metric that matters." Outside, the city still moved with its usual rhythm, unaware that one small boy had shifted a balance in his own life and in the life of a child who depended entirely on him. Samuel knew the scrutiny would never completely vanish, that whispers of scandal, judgment, and misunderstanding would follow him like shadows. But here, for the first time, he had a place, protection, and guidance. And for Amara, that meant a future. If you were Samuel, holding the life of someone you loved after surviving everything the world threw at you, would you feel relief, or fear? Comment now, relief or fear. Adrian stepped closer, his figure towering but somehow less intimidating than before. "This house," he said, "will be your training ground, your shelter, your test. Every decision you make here matters. The city outside will continue to judge. But inside, your actions define you." Samuel nodded, determination hardening in his chest. "I understand, sir." A small sound broke the quiet, the gentle coo of Amara waking fully, stretching tiny arms toward him. He knelt beside the crib, lifting her gently into his arms. She blinked up at him, trusting, innocent, and utterly dependent. Samuel felt the weight of responsibility settle over him, not as a burden, but as a purpose. If you could hold the life of someone so fragile, would you dare to fail them? Comment yes or no, because this is the kind of responsibility that defines a lifetime. Adrian watched silently, recognizing the boy's unwavering resolve. Remember this, he said softly, power and wealth are meaningless without integrity. You've already proven that. Never forget it. Samuel held Amara close, feeling her heartbeat against his own. He had survived streets, rumors, gangs, hunger, and humiliation. He had faced scrutiny and judgment in a world that had little patience for innocence or persistence. And now, he had been given a chance, a second chance, to build a life, protect his sister, and prove that courage and loyalty could triumph over circumstance. The mansion was quiet, filled with soft light and the promise of a new beginning. Samuel knew challenges would come, mistakes would be made, and tests would continue. But for the first time, he understood that survival was no longer enough. He had a mission, a purpose, and someone to protect. And that made him unstoppable. He kissed Amara's forehead gently, whispering, "We made it, little one. And I will never let you go." Outside, the city moved on, oblivious. But inside the mansion, a boy who had once been accused, humiliated, and doubted now stood as a guardian, a survivor, and a beacon of hope. And for Samuel and Amara, the journey had only just begun.